yourselves, and yes, I'll let you put the slides up. Thank you.
Shall I just kick off? So tonight we have colleagues from DWP here who are going to just do a presentation, short presentation, take us through progress in terms of universal credit for Haringey and what they administer within DWP. So we have Ian and Phyllis here. I'll hand over to them, and if there's any supplementary questions in relation to how the council may support or how we work together, and we'll tackle that afterwards as a bit of a partnering team.
Okay, so can I just remind colleagues to introduce themselves before they speak? Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. I'll introduce myself. Andy Briggs, Assistant Director for Corporate and Customer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So my name is Phyllis. I'm the Partnership Manager for DWP in Haringey. And Ian, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. I'm Ian Smith. I actually work across 3 boroughs with part of that thing. So we just Haringey, Enfield and Islington with our people who work with people who are gang affiliated and also in the prison. But here with Phyllis tonight.
Thank you. So I'm going to try and share my screen with you. Bear with me. We usually have trouble with all of this, but hopefully everything will be okay. Yeah, it looks good. So I'm hoping you all got copies of the slideshow I put together. I just wanted to give you an idea of, I suppose, what the DWP intent is overall going forward, but more to the point what we're doing on a local level. So I thought I'd start, I didn't want to bog you down with too much data either, but thought it might be useful to give you an idea of the figures of people, actual people on universal credit in the borough. And no surprise to see that Tottenham has the highest load.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Can we remove the sidebar and make that screen a little larger? Thank you, because it is at some distance from us here.
Sorry.
No, you weren't to know, but if you could just do that, that would be great. Thank you.
Is that better? Hopefully that is.
Could you enlarge the actual screen? We've got a lovely bit of the universal credit, but the numbers on the other side.
Ian, are you able to help out here? I do apologise.
Try and
let me try and skip back and not share. Hang on a minute. Oh dear, the pieces. Let me go back there.
I haven't actually got the thing up on my thing. Sorry, I thought you'd got it. Bear with me 1 second, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, apologies, everybody.
I need to actually get the
Councillor O'Connor, just by way of explanation, what we and Phyllis can see is not probably what you can see. So it appears as a full slide on our screens. So you may need to kind of guide us as to what you are able to see.
We could see half the screen with the information on, and the other half of the screen was a nice deep blue with universal credit written on it.
Right, let me just try. Right, I'm just going to escape out of that for 1 moment. I'm just going to try and share. I'm going to try and share it from mine. It won't be a moment. That's all right. Share screen. Share screen. So bear with me 1 second. How is that looking?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ian. Hurrah.
Okay.
So next slide. Yes, thank you. That's much better. Thank you. So I'm just going to turn my camera off there. So as I was saying, the figures, just to obviously, I suppose, share the fact that, you know, Tottenham does have the larger load, and also a bit of information with regards to how the registers have gone down slightly month on month and year on year. I suppose it's not surprising to see that the figures are so high. Haringey do have one of the larger loads with regards to universal credit. So I suppose what we need to really cut to the chase and discuss is what we're doing to address the fact that we've got so many people on our register. So Ian, if you want to bring up the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So the measures that we've introduced. So I suppose across the country, it was about 15,000 or so new work coaches that were recruited in to support with making new claims to benefit and being work coaches to support those customers with challenges and also into work. In Haringey, we recruited nearly 100 or 100 or more actually into both sites. It's worth saying as well that they were on fixed term appointments and the contracts will be coming to an end in June. But those people who want to stick around and stay with DWP have been given the opportunity to reapply for those roles. We did lose quite a few of our new recruits because they went back to the jobs that they had pre-COVID. But those people, as I say, who wanted to apply, they will know by the end of this month if they've been successful. The other thing that the DWP have introduced, or the government have introduced, is the Way to Work initiative, which isn't a programme, but it's a way of working. And I think in some ways we've kind of forgotten what we used to do pre-COVID, as though everything we're doing now is very new. But actually, if anything, I think it's what we used to do, but maybe ramping up that activity a bit more. So the Way to Work has a new jobs mission to get 500,000 people into work by June. So we're working as hard as we can to make that happen. And of course, a bit of a caveat there that is only for people who we feel are job ready and able to take a job that is going to sustain them in employment and make sure that they're able to pay their bills, etc. The Way to Work campaign will focus on getting job ready people, and I think it's again really important to hone in on the job ready people who are actually ready for work, off universal credit and into work, filling the vacancies which are at a record high. I think about 1.34 million across the country to be filled. So quite a few vacancies for people to kind of, I suppose, train for and to consider going into. Next one, Ian, thank you. And targeted, targeted predominantly at those in the intensive work search group on universal credit. Way to Work will support people back into work faster than ever before, filling vacancies more quickly. So within universal credit, there are different regimes, and the intensive work search group is a cohort of customer who are deemed to be ready to think about training opportunities or even employment opportunities. Next one, Ian, please. So customers will be supported in this with more time spent face-to-face with a work coach to receive better tailored support. What we're currently doing is smoothing out caseload numbers, which have been very high and probably very difficult for work coaches to deliver the service that we would want to deliver. So we're looking to make that more achievable. And also, I suppose, now we're getting back to a more business as usual approach, seeing customers face to face, and those up to 13 weeks on universal credit. We're looking at seeing those customers weekly or fortnightly where we can. So it really is about that kind of regular engagement, working at pace, addressing needs, moving people forward in the best possible way. Next one, Ian, please.
Totally.
The other thing with the Way to Work is getting employers into the job centres to do direct recruitments. Historically, we used to do this, but it again is about ramping up that activity and trying to get an employer into the job centres every day. So that's what we're currently trying to do. Revisiting those relationships with employers that we had relationships historically again, and then making new relationships as well. And then the job club activity in the job centres. You may be familiar with the term job club, but again, it's about looking at customers attending those sessions that are put together and seeing all the opportunities that are available to them, and hopefully leaving the session signed up to something that's going to enhance their chances of moving forward.
Yeah, and Phyllis, if I may come in there, additionally to that, in my work within prisons, I'm based in HMP Pentonville. We are now setting up with their employer hubs in the prisons as well. So people who are coming out of prison who are job ready, looking and working with them and trying to get them into employment as soon as they're coming out, which and then hopefully reduce reoffending that way as well. That is an agenda with the Ministry of Justice, but we are heavily involved. And it's currently being rolled out. We haven't actually got for Pentonville got our rollout date yet, but I think we should have that within the next couple of weeks and know exactly when that's going. But I've seen this in a couple of other prisons, and yeah, we are actually in there working. We see the people coming in. We'll see them. We'll work with the providers and actually try and get them into employment. And so far, we're having some fairly good successes in one or two. That actually we are getting people who are job ready and working with employer brokers to help do that as well.
Thank you. Next one, please. So just a list of employers, a sample of employers, I suppose, that we're able to secure into the job centres at the moment. Stansted Airport, you probably know that the Tottenham Hill Station will take someone to the airport, and with the 80% reduction in travel, That can be quite appealing to people, but the guys from the airport come in to recruit for the aviation and retail and hospitality roles in the airport. Also, Haringey Works, a fantastic relationship with Haringey Works, and they're in our sites on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, registering people for the temporary council vacancies that are available. Also, Tottenham Foundation, our ongoing relationship with the charitable arm of the football club to support people into jobs in the stadium, hospitality, stewards, even at the training ground. So they're coming in talking to our customers directly about those opportunities. And then there's a number of other employers that we've been able to get in recently. Lots in the care sector, not surprisingly, but we are getting people sign up and, be willing to consider that area of work, which is really good because we know it is a sector that is in need of people working in it. Thank you, Ian. Next one. And something called the Sector Work Academy model, Sector-Based Work Academy model, which DWP have introduced, and it's been around for a little while, but we really had, I suppose, a focus on it in the last year. Just to explain what it is, it's basically a programme we can put our customers through, knowing that there will be a guaranteed interview with an employer at the end of it. It can be up to 6 weeks, it can be a week, 2 weeks, whatever the duration requires. And the elements included are training for a specific job at the employer's request, or just general employability, getting people ready to sit in front of the employer, CV prep, interview techniques, etc. But as I say, that guaranteed interview is really important because it's given our customers who ordinarily wouldn't get the chance of sitting in front of an employer the opportunity to actually sell themselves and secure employment. And just an example of the kinds of swaps, as we call them, that we have. We've always had a great relationship with the college on the High Road, the Canal, the College of Haringey, Enfield and North East London, and the sector courses that they run, the warehouse and forklift, the CSS construction, SIA. To their credit, they've become very employer focused and been able to bring employers to the end of those courses. So having that element of exposure to those areas of work included in that course with the guaranteed interview in the end has helped progress people into work in those areas. Also, our local provider, again, a good relationship with 5E over the years, some of you may be familiar with. They've been doing production operative computer maintenance courses, and again, running as swaps to get customers into the jobs available. And there's just some examples of other swaps that we run. That list isn't exhaustive. We've run many in different areas, but hospitality is right up there, health and social care, obviously. And recently signed up a BT contact centre work from home swap for people to consider going into. Thames Water, aimed at the 18 to 24 customers, well, has recently been brought on board. And a civil service swap, although this doesn't actually have guaranteed jobs at the end, it has still been put under that kind of banner. The idea being that we put people through the course at the college to, I suppose it's a complicated application process going into the civil service or applying for civil service jobs. So it was enhancing people's ability and knowledge as to how they might best approach that and give them a proper insight as to the kinds of things they'd need to equip themselves with. So that's our swap model, which I say has been really successful. And then I thought it would be useful to give a bit of a local response to customer needs and what we've been doing on the ground. So the provision available to customers. We've always had this kind of provision available, and I've been able to negotiate with local providers through their adult skills funding that they put courses on for our customers for ESOL, for English for speakers of other languages, for example. And many customers in our books need functional skills and literacy and numeracy. And obviously digital capability was always up there with regards to the introduction of universal credit and people's ability to engage through digital means. So these are kind of ongoing. These are always in the background. These are always those provisions that are available as and when we feel we need them, depending on the numbers, but pretty much ongoing, really. And next one, Ian, please. And then we have programmes brought in through our DWP funding opportunities. So it's been great that we've had something called grant funding, because that's given me the opportunity to give funding to local organisations who are experts in their area of work, knowing a customer group and being able to progress them in a certain way. So that's one way we've funded. The other way is we have our commissioning platform, the dynamic purchasing system, where organisations are encouraged to register and make their offer. And then if a business case that we write goes on that platform and the ask matches what they're able to offer, then our buyer will decide on the best value for money and fit for purpose organisation to come through and be given a contract to be able to deliver that particular service. We usually base it on number of engagements, and there's usually a percentage that we expect that organisation to progress into employment as well. So it's all very geared to employment outcomes. So I've got basic digital support there again, because it's not something that's always available through the adult skills funding provision with regards to local providers. And again, through that, it's something that people who have come through to be able to deliver can get people into work as well. Something I've always been asked for was a kind of standalone food and hygiene certificate course, which isn't something that's necessarily funded. So we had to kind of think about a programme and request something in that space. So we actually have recently signed up a hospitality programme, and mindful of the fact that there are lots of places opening in the borough, hospitality, you know, places selling food, eating, etc. So having our local people be able to go into those local jobs with the certification and the skills and knowledge, etc., was something we wanted to make sure we could come up with. Our professional and executive, I suppose that's geared more towards our customers who have had high level careers and maybe need to consider transferable skills into other areas of work. Something especially for our 50+ customer base, who especially through COVID kind of lost their way a bit, and we need to be able to support them in you know, with regards to moving on and securing employment again. Graduates, we've been able to support them as well with a programme specific to their needs and sign up an organisation to support in that area. Support for young people generally. Some of you might know Access UK, who operate in the borough, a great organisation who, again, we've had a long-standing relationship with, and they seem to understand the mindset of the young people and being able to, you know, get them to understand how they need to, and more to the point, why they need to change maybe the way they think about, you know, moving forward. So they're helping us in that area. Support for people from Somalia. RISE, the organisation based at the Trampery in 639 across the road from Tottenham Jobs Centre. Awali, who heads that organisation, has been able to support those people coming through his doors. Again, because he knows how they kind of, you know, engage and what their limitations and what they need to consider to what kind of support they need, more to the point, I suppose. Debt and money management, that was a big one. On the back of, I suppose, the £20 top up being taken away from customers, very mindful of the fact that we needed to support as much as we could. But interestingly enough, as much as, well, I suppose as much as we had the highest referral number in the district in Haringey, the numbers were still very low, and it seemed that people were burying their heads in the sand quite a bit with regards to acknowledging their money issues and their, you know, financial hardship, etc. So I'm looking to get that brought in again, especially around the fuel poverty, you know, situation that's going to be hitting us all going forward, and hoping that we can get more referrals into that programme for people in the borough. Next one, Ian, please. Oh, there is a hand up. Should I answer that now before we go any further, Councillor? Or...
Sorry, yeah, I can't actually see from here who's handed up. Is this your last slide, Phyllis?
No, just a couple, very quickly. Shall I whiz through?
Well, I think so. I'll just check what the question is. Sorry, I can't see who it is. Yvonne. Yvonne, did you want to ask us a question on the slide that's just been?
Yes, I just want to ask how many of these job vacancies are open to the deaf and disabled, because there's no mention at all about them taking people on with needs. I think it's important we need to know that every person in the community can apply for these positions. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree, Yvonne. And I mean, we very much promote disability confident with employers and try and get them to sign up to that. And we have increased our resource around the disability employment advisor role in the job centres as well, to support people into jobs as well. I'm not saying it's easy from the employer side of things to get people into work. I know that we've got the Deaf Hub in Islington, which again, DWP have kind of co-funded at times to support people as well. There's probably, I won't deny, more we could do in that space, but I think as we're trying to get our act together more in this business as usual approach, it's definitely right up there with regards to something we're looking to address more effectively.
So Phyllis, can I ask, going on from Yvonne's question, how many people do we manage to specifically help in sort of who've got a disability in Haringey through the DWP support?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head, I'm afraid, Pippa, but I can certainly look into it and get back to you with some figures if that would help.
Yeah, it would be helpful, and I think probably for Yvonne as well, it would be useful to know which areas people are getting jobs in. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Okay, so let's go back another slide, Ian. Sorry.
So back again, you say?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure I finish that. Yeah, no, that's great. And then forward again. Sorry. And then we have the opportunity to co-finance programs with the council, which we have always done in different areas, whether it be mental health or care leavers has been an ongoing one actually in that particular area. The idea being that we put some money in the pot, the local authority puts some money in the pot, or there is a kind of payment in kind with regards to coming through with resource or premises to deliver a particular service. And it's very much a community-based approach, looking at the gaps in the borough and things that probably need more of a focus than other things. As we know, women going through domestic violence, I mean, you know, the figures are just ridiculous in Haringey, so it was how we could support women into work. So we co-financed a programme, Solace Word, the provider of choice, and that's just actually coming to an end. And I'm not sure of the figures because we're going to have a kind of final meeting to discuss what the engagements and the outcomes look like. But that was certainly a worthwhile programme that we put in place. There's also something called the Street Homeless Employability Support Programme, which is to support street homeless into employment where possible. A lot of those referrals coming out of Mulberry Junction in the borough, and the provider Radical Recruit supporting with a number of issues around, you can imagine, homeless people and what they're having to deal with, but trying to have that end aim of securing employment. And as I said, support for care leavers, an organisation, Drive Forward, who we have had in the leaving care team a few times, supporting young people to secure opportunities in apprenticeships, traineeships, employment. We've had some great success with 7 young people going into internships in the civil service as a result of their efforts in the borough. And recently, we're just about to start referrals into the autism hub in the borough, helping young people with autism. We acknowledged the fact that there was a lot happening in the educational space with autism, but that employability support and into actual work, young people seem to be kind of falling off the cliff edge, and we wanted to pick that up and be able to support in the best possible way. So again, co-financing a programme with that has been really, really good, and that's starting pretty soon. Okay, next slide, please, Ian. And then I thought it'd be worthwhile talking about our community team. So we have obviously the work coaches in the job centres, but we have a lot of resource out there in the community working really effectively and collaboratively, and, you know, making things happen with other organisations, agencies, etc. So our support for families employment advisors, they work with the local authority team. This was previously known as the Troubled Families team, which you probably know. And the girls who work in there work very closely with the caseworkers, going into homes, looking where they can help the families at the very beginning of that journey to get into training and employment opportunities, but also looking at how they can maximise benefits or income overall for those families as well, if they're missing out on claiming things that they should be ordinarily claiming. The next one I'm going to park because Ian's going to go through that. We have a leaving care work coach working alongside, again, the local authority team and alongside Drive Forward there as well. She helps those people who are destined to come onto universal credit, make sure that they're ready to go as soon as they hit 18 years old by making sure that they've got everything that they need. but also, again, working alongside Drive Forward with those employment opportunities and the traineeships, apprenticeship information, and getting as much information to those young people and holding sessions and everything else, and untangling some of the problems, more to the point, for those young people, as well as educating our own staff as to the kind of chaotic lives these young people lead. And if they're coming through our job centres and seeing work coaches, that there needs to be an understanding and easement supplied to them being able to engage effectively and an understanding of the lives that they lead. And then the next one I'm going to park because Ian's going to go into that. But finally, our partnership support. So some of you may know Peter Ryan, but Peter goes around our district talking to organisations, even the NHS, council agencies, about DWP work overall, whether it be pensions, child maintenance, universal credit, just benefits in general, but enhancing knowledge and making that kind of connection and, signing us all up. So if there's a kind of go-to person, a spot that's needed, he's putting all that in place as well. So there's a kind of seamless way into the organisation, if you like, for people. So Ian, I'm going to hand over to you for the two areas that you want to go through.
Okay, I'll start with the community engagement advisors. We have in our North London district 3 of them, and well, they do work across each other. They work very well together as a team, including Haringey. So actually, Haringey, Islington, and Enfield. But we would then work across into East London, down to East London district, down to Hackney as well. They work in working across. Particularly, the close working is Haringey and Enfield, because what they do is they mirror the police command on that. They will work with anyone who is potentially gang affiliated or at risk of gang affiliation and crime. And they will take referrals from the work coaches. They take them from probation. They'll take them from the police, from anywhere. So, if anyone has someone that they think may be gang affiliated, because the young people who often won't say it quite often, but what they will do is they will hand over. The work coach will take a very light touch approach with those people. They'll hand them over, and they will help them take those small steps. Because with these people, it can be a very, very long journey, because the idea is to get them out from gangs, help them getting into work, and help them help reduce reoffending from that. They will work with the organisations. We're getting back out in the community a lot more now, so back into places like probation as well, and so. It is very much taking those very small steps to help us get through, and by them taking them over, then the job centres will actually make allowances for them to be working with them, and those small steps, so they're trying to stop them. We're trying to stop them falling into the traps of if they don't engage initially, or there are times when they don't engage, because these people lead very chaotic lives, or can do, is that. They stop them falling in the gaps of sanctions and things like that. So they will actually come alongside. And whereas the work coach will have a limited amount of time in the job centre, these guys will actually take the time they need. And for sometimes it could be half an hour a week. Other times they could spend an entire morning with someone. So they don't just work with people on benefits. They will work with people who are not necessarily on benefits, but are at that risk as well. So the whole thing is really around that sort of prevention of people getting into gangs or and reoffending. Our prison advisors, I look after them, but I'm also myself partly based in HMP Pentonville. We support people when they from the moment they come in. Actually, we see people when they come in now, and we just sort of ramping back up, having got into the prisons, and we'll try and keep people's try and keep people's housing open if they're on remand or if they're less than 6 months sentence. If someone's coming in on a short sentence, we will try and and they're in employment, we will try and work with them and the employer to keep their job open. And we do have quite a good we've had some quite good successes in that as well. And we will get the person into our office. We have an office in the prison. We'll get the person down. We will get permission to talk to them, talk to their employer, and do that as well. Pre-release, we will see them just to make sure they got things like benefits imposed. We will actually then try also a lot to do with employment as well. And we do have some really good links with some of the employment brokers like Fairer Chance, and for example, and that sort of then trying to make sure that where possible they are coming out and they are going straight into work where we can, or very, very close to. Excuse me, sorry. We will also work with the other organisation, the prison, because I think one of the couple of the biggest things of coming out, people not having bank accounts, they're not having ID, and in Pentonville they're trying something, and I think it's actually over in Islington with the council there. They're trying is an ID letter they can use to introduce. Unfortunately for DWP, we can only take that as secondary evidence, but we have a workaround that we can do what we call a biographical interview, where we will ask some things that only they would know to confirm their identity. And outside as well, we work with our work coaches. We will support them, and one of the things we found has been very successful has actually been that we have one of us comes alongside a work coach if they've got an ex-offender returning citizen that's a prison leaver that's coming in back into the job centre, that we can get alongside them and actually maybe have that as a three-way conversation with us, the work coach and the person, and that really actually also it looks to increase learning within ourselves as well. And as I mentioned earlier, there is an initiative that's coming up within prisons, within all the resettlement prisons in the country. There are two running in South London at the moment, which are the employer hubs, whereby we're looking at working ourselves, bringing employers in, bringing in the employer brokers in, and other organisations, whereby there will be a place in the prison that we can actually go and see them on the 12 weeks before they come out. And actually, as I said, it kept them moving at least towards employment, if not actually into employment. Now, as I said earlier, this is not, we haven't got the actual launch date. It is a Ministry of Justice initiative, but we are ourselves getting very, very linked up in that. So those are two areas which we use very much about to help reduce. It's about trying to help reduce reduce reoffending, and bring those people back into mainstream.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Can I just check, is that the last slide that you have, Phyllis?
It is.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, going to go straight to Councillor Matt White.
Sorry, before we go to questions, I was wondering if we could have a look at pretty much the first slide again. It was basically a table with figures. I wasn't able to see the figures or the column headings. The screen's now been moved closer to us as panel members, so hopefully I'll be able to see it now.
I'm just getting it back up. sorry about that. So that's that slide there.
Yeah, that's the slide. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've got Councillor Carlin like to ask a question. Thanks.
Hi, do you gather statistics about the nature of the claimants, or customers as they're called, with regard to their current skills, etc., and how much of what you do is actually targeted? I know that there's certain organizations that you're working with specifically, but actually targeted towards trying to get people into the fields in which they already have experience. And the reason that I'm asking that is because we know that in Haringey, we have a large number of people who have worked in the creative industries, for example. And if they can get further work in the creative industries, they're likely to not actually need to be on universal credit at all, because those jobs will pay enough for them to be fully independent. But if they actually go and work in the care industry, for example, then the chances are that they're still going to be recipients of universal credit to help them with their housing needs. So I'm just wondering how detailed the statistics are in terms of graduates, industries people have been working within each of your job centres. Thank you.
I mean, oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry for this, gone.
Well, I was going to say, with regards, it's a difficult one, really. I mean, having hard data specific to that kind of thing is hard to come by. What we do have is more anecdotal information from work coaches directly. What happens is that initial contact with a customer, that kind of journey is determined at that very first engagement with regards to what the customer is looking to get into. And I absolutely will support as much as possible with regards to, you know, that job being available and being able to re-engage in that particular area of employment. But then if you've got someone who 6 months down the line is still trying to get into that area of employment, then that has to be a very different conversation. And we're not talking about just putting someone into a, you know, a pre-entry job or whatever it might be. You know, there are transferable skills where other things can be considered. But I suppose what I'm trying to put out there, you know, please don't think we're just sticking people into work for the sake of it. One thing that's really important is, like you said, we don't want people to be dependent on universal credit. We need people to come off universal credit and be able to sustain without that help. So having kind of in-work benefit calculations to determine what potential incomes might be is something that the work coach would undertake. The other thing, if I can give you an example as well, is if we've got someone who is coming out of a labouring job and suddenly their housing costs are raised and they've got a CSCS card, but they know that there's a more bespoke job that they could potentially go for, but there's no training to be had. We can use our DWP funding, something called low value procurement, to buy in training for that particular individual, because I suppose it's about weighing up the fact that that person could be indefinitely on benefits as opposed to throwing some funding at something and ensuring that that person's able to come off universal credit altogether. So I suppose, as I say, it's difficult to get that kind of, you know, information pulled off anywhere. Universal credit itself doesn't capture in the way that the old system did with regards to occupations that people were looking to get into. We're not able to pull off that kind of information with universal credit. So as I say, it's incredibly hard. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Lords' hand up. Lords, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, there's two issues I'd like to raise. One is sort of about the offenders. I've worked most of my life in probation, and I was a manager before retiring in Islington in probation. And Islington had a very, very positive project on the go, and I'm sure it's been cut back because of all the cutbacks. But it recognised that for persistent offenders, it's very, very difficult to become legal, to become a good citizen, because that first year work is often not a positive for some people. It doesn't bring in the money, it doesn't bring in the support, and it's really difficult to make that transfer. And this project in Islington gave support, financial, housing, etc., for a year, just so that they could be protected in some ways in making that transfer, going from persistent offending to being an upright citizen and contributing to the community. But it is a difficult one. So that's the first. Has any consideration been given in Haringey for such a project? And the other one is, I was just wondering whether the DWP has been invited into some of the work that's going on with regards to SEND in the borough. And I know that there's a group looking at transition at the moment, which is, you know, often raised, and it was raised as an issue only this afternoon in a voluntary sector forum about the difficulties that those people that come in under SEND make them from going from school to the work of, you know, to the work environment. But have you been invited into this work that's going on? Because it is a very positive, you know, sort of piece of work that is going on by the local authority at the moment.
Can I answer the second bit of the question, if that's okay?
And then I'll answer the first.
One of the community roles that I forgot to mention was actually our Support for Schools advisor. She actually goes into schools to support young people and enhance their knowledge around apprenticeships being a good way forward for when they leave. I suppose it's around prevention of NEETs, etc. But she's very involved in the SEND arena in Haringey. I've not touched base with her recently, actually, because she's directly under Ian, but she has always been involved in the discussions going on in the borough. And I think there was something with regards to a funding opportunity we had before COVID as well, where we were co-financing something specific to the SEND side of things. But I'll have to chase that up actually with regards to where she is at the moment. But yeah, DWP certainly are involved in discussions around that. Ian, did you want to take the first bit?
Yes, regarding that, I'm not aware of anything in Haringey as it is. We work very close, very closely with the prison and our prison, myself and my colleagues as prison work coaches. We will work very closely with our work coaches on that. But I'm going to sort of take that, or may I take that away and see what I can do a bit of digging and see what I can find out.
Yes, because I think the first year it is particularly, I'm talking about the persistent offender, and for them to actually, I mean, often they sort of leave school very early, they go into offending from maybe 13, 14 onwards, and then for them to actually make the transfer, it's a difficult one. And we just assume that by giving them a job, sometimes we've answered all their problems. Sometimes in probation, we used to sort of see it as the beginning of their problems.
Yeah, I must admit, in Islington, I do work. We do work with probation in the prison, but actually, I've also got some very good Islington probation contacts, who I work with as well. And I know the gangs guys doing it, have those in Harrogate. I'm not, and I do remember the scheme you're talking about as well, but I'm not sure. I'm not aware of anything in Harrogate. But if I may take that away and find out, please, Councillor.
Or otherwise, we should ask for it.
Yes.
Yeah. If that's a gap, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Lords.
Take that away and do some.
Yeah, thank you, Lords. Any other questions from panel members? Yeah, Councillor Guinness.
Thank you, Chair. I had a really quick question. You know, all of the services that you outlined that resident can receive, are they only limited to the recipient of universal credit? Or because in terms of like the graduate program, I know lots of young graduates, they kind of refuse to sign, like wanting to claim benefits, or even if they are not, you know, if they don't have much to live on, they would probably try to do shift work and other things. So it will be good to know that it's open to young people from, especially from the disadvantaged background, because they would need, young graduates from disadvantaged background needs lots of support in kind of making their way into the job market, because those are the skills that you usually take from parents, family, or, you know, like within your circle, parents and work parents haven't worked that kind of field, assist you. So I just wanted to basically know if it's kind of universally offered to young people, graduates from Tottenham, or if it's limited to just those on benefits, universal credit, sorry.
Yeah, Councillor, I'm afraid mostly they are restricted to people on benefits, but that's not to say in the past we haven't funded things along the lines of prevention, you know, not acknowledging that people not in receipt of benefits, but avoiding doing so. But the majority, it's always going to be really about the customers registered on our in our job centres. Really, that would be our focus. And you know, we have quite a few graduates actually who come on because they need an income of sorts and register for it, universal credit. But that's how they can access the support as well. So maybe that's something worth knowing. You know, that there is lots of support within JCP, and you know, if people are without an income, there's nothing wrong with registering for universal credit as a way forward, not just to get, you know, some kind of money in, but also to access all the different types of support that we're bringing under, you know, within JCP itself.
I'm just going to add to that. With our people who work with those who are gang affiliated or risk of gang affiliated, they do work with people who are not necessarily on benefits. Because they will get referrals from probation, from the police, various places, so they will come alongside us because they're trying to sort of keep them out from that sort of lifestyle as well. So in that area, yes, we will. Just, I know we're talking about graduates and working there, but just within the general wider services, they will work with people who are not necessarily on benefits.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask a couple of, well, quite a few questions actually, and we've only got 9 minutes left for this session. I was just going to ask around the data behind the slides that you presented, particularly the last 3 slides, to be honest. I think the co-funding and the commissioning community team, sorry. So I wasn't sure how many people that were being helped through any of these initiatives, because I don't remember hearing any figures for any of this. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do because we have very little time left. And I don't know if you've got any of these figures for any of these initiatives.
Well, to be honest with you, Councillor, they vary. I mean,
sorry?
Oh, I can hear an echo. Sorry, I can hear. I was saying.
Hi, Phyllis. Were you answering?
Chair, you've got your mic on. Right, that's brilliant. Yeah, I was saying that, to be honest, they vary depending on the actual programme. One thing I've started to do is commission smaller numbers, because I think there's been so much coming at the work coaches, so much for them to consider for their customers. It's been hard for them to keep up, and referrals haven't always come through in the way I've wanted. So, I mean, some of these programmes we might sign up to get 100 engagements. That's sign up 100 people, with the organisation then coming through and getting 40% of those people into work at the very least. If they could get more people, that would be great, but they would have to progress everybody in some way. But for example, the hospitality course or training that the programme that I've recently commissioned, I looked at getting 20 people through that. Now, I see no reason why the organisation can't get all of those 20 people into work, but as a minimum, they will be expected to get 30% into work. So it really varies. It varies with regards to what we feel the need is, and, you know, have we got the people to actually go into these programmes? I mean, that's the difficulty, I suppose, with some of the anecdotal data that you rely on, because you know, a work coach may say, oh, I need this for my customer. I've got 10 customers on my caseload or something, but you hope that that's replicated across other colleagues in the job centre, and that you're going to get guaranteed the referrals into these programmes. And you don't want to set the organisations up to fail either, because they have to come through with their contracts and deliver. But as I say, it's you know, the numbers vary depending on what the need and what I ask for, basically.
Okay, thanks, Phyllis. I think my point was because they were co-funded with the council, so I think it would be interesting for us as councillors. So I think a recommendation from tonight would be, it was fantastic you gave us, and you're very enthusiastic, but it was a 30-minute presentation. If we had more information before we came, we could actually just literally ask you specific questions on things, and actually then you can expand on the projects. I think it's a bit difficult to know quite where to focus the questioning tonight, because we've just got the headlines. And it's great actually for us, because as a scrutiny committee, we want the majority of the time to be questioning and finding out more. So we normally ask people to sort of present for 5 minutes, just so you know that. So whilst we appreciate your enthusiasm and it was highly informative, it would just be really helpful next time if we had the detail beforehand. That would be really helpful. I'll finish on one last question then. You said about supporting Somalian, our Somali population, and that was great. I'm just wondering, is there anything that Haringey is doing with potentially supporting Ukrainian refugees coming over? Because we've been looking at sort of all, figures and potentially people coming into Haringey and needing a huge amount of support. So is there any new initiative that's being put in place at this point that you can sort of let us know about? Thank you.
Nothing at this moment in time, I'm afraid, specific to the Ukrainians, but I imagine there will be something coming quite soon. I mean, our response to the previous intake of people was that we with the hotels and everything else, we went quite quickly out to the hotels to do risk assessments and ensure that they were fit for purpose for the population to be taken in. So at this moment in time, I have no information, I'm afraid, but I don't expect there to be a delay in getting something through quite quickly based on what's happening.
Okay, thank you. I'll just check if there's any last questions from the panel. Okay, if not, so yes, any further information, particularly around the domestic violence initiatives that you mentioned, and I think you were talking about the Chad Gordon campus for that initiative into supporting people with autism into work. So specifically, if you've got anything on that, I know the panel will be really pleased to get any further information or any data you've got on these. That would be fantastic. But thank you very much for coming this evening. It's been really interesting hearing from you, and thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. So we're moving on to the Fairness Commission. There's an update on recommendations. We've got Jean Taylor is attending to speak to the report. Jean, there's quite a number of recommendations. I'll be really grateful if you didn't read them all out, because they're very long, and there's an awful lot of them. I think we'll take up the entire time if you do that. So if you could just, I don't know if you're going to share them, or do you want us just to note them in our packs, or are you sharing them on the screen, or what was your thoughts?
If you could please note them in your packs, that would be helpful. I was just going to offer really briefly. I think there are still, just for the purposes of the kind of the audience, I think, oh, thank you, the echo has gone. Okay, so I was just going to offer a really kind of brief introduction, and then kind of give you the rest of the time to ask any kind of questions. This is obviously kind of an update on the implementation of the Fairness Commission. Just by way of reminder, the Fairness Commission published its final report and recommendations back in February 2020, on the eve really of the kind of the COVID pandemic. And this the report, or the final report of the Commission, set out a series of recommendations for the Council, the London Mayor, national government, and partners, including the police, voluntary sector, and schools, all designed to achieve change and increase equality and fairness across the borough. So at the kind of time, it was anticipated that the Council would publish a full cabinet response in the summer of 2020, responding to the final Commission report and saying how recommendations were implemented. But this report had to be delayed because of the kind of the demands of the COVID response. Work to implement the recommendations has continued during the pandemic. And I suppose I would just really emphasize that really kind of what we saw in terms of kind of the impact of the pandemic really underlined some of the messages about the nature of unfairness in the borough and the impact on our residents. And I suppose kind of just linking back to the kind of previous evidence session, you know, for example, it highlighted the impact or disproportionate impact on disabled people in long-term conditions, the kind of health inequalities affecting kind of different groups, and also kind of the impact of kind of low pay. So a progress report on the on implementation went to Cabinet in March 2021, with a further progress report to Cabinet in July 2021. So you'll be able to see the kind of the progress of implementation through those reports. You'll note in the kind of July report that we emphasised that, you know, we regard the responsibility for implementation of the Fairness Commission recommendations as being mainstreamed or embedded into the kind of the wider objectives for services across the council. And what that means in practice is that the expectation is that going forward, and where appropriate, activity to implement the recommendations should be reflected in directorate and service planning. So the detailed appendix that you have in front of you sets out updates to progress since July of last year. For recommendations to the Council and its partners, the appendix provides a detailed overview of firstly what's been implemented to date, and secondly what our plans are for implementation in the future. And Cabinet members agreed the approach to implementing recommendations based on this detail. For recommendations that are directed at others, namely kind of national government, schools and the kind of Mayor of London, the appendix provides commentary about what progress we've seen in those areas addressed by the kind of the recommendations, including actions taken by the council and partners related to these, for example, in seeking to influence relevant policy agendas. So I will pause there. Really happy to offer any further kind of context, but otherwise happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. So you have somebody else on the meeting with you? Are you?
Oh, yeah, sorry, and that is kind of Claire McCarthy. I'll let her introduce herself.
Good evening, councillors. Apologies that you weren't expecting me, but my name's Claire McCarthy and I'm the Assistant Director for Strategy, Communications and Collaboration, and just work closely with Jean.
Excellent, thank you. Just to know who's on the call. Thank you. Okay, so I read these recommendations that they are quite detailed and there's a lot of information underlying them, obviously. I've got a number of little, these are small, succinct answered questions for clarity, but I'm going to throw it open to my fellow councillors first, because yes, we'll go to Councillor Matt White.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a specific question on recommendation 15? It says in the progress, so this is the recommendation on private rental sector and council improving the quality and security of housing for the ever-increasing number of residents who have no choice but to rent in the private sector. We introduced an additional licensing scheme for HMOs in April 2019, so that's almost 3 years ago now, and it's good to see that 1,000 properties are now licensed with the council. Has the council conducted a kind of estimate of what proportion that 1,000 licensed properties represent of the properties that are required to hold a license, and what are we doing about those landlords that haven't yet got a license, who've now had almost 3 years to get one? Are we doing anything about that? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor White. Really kind of helpful kind of question. I think it's one that I'd suggest we kind of take away and kind of get an accurate kind of answer for you on, unless kind of Claire wants to kind of come in with a comment.
Well, Chair and councillors, I think the Councillor White's very, important and a question kind of does highlight a slight issue that we've got with us presenting this report to you, because obviously this report reflects activity that's going on across the council, the detail of which inevitably is held by services rather than myself or Jean. And so we're not able to give detailed answers on the kind of absolute specifics of the individual policy or council work behind each individual recommendation for reasons that will be in a sense obvious. So we can absolutely take away, if there are detailed questions on exactly some of the details of some of these things, we can absolutely take those away and provide responses. In addition, we sort of hope that this report back might be helpful for you in terms of thinking about areas you might want to explore further, whether that's in questions to cabinet members or at future meetings, or in the relevant subject specific discussions that you'll have at future meetings as well. But we'll endeavour where we can to provide additional information, but we're not experts on every single recommendation and the detail behind it.
Thank you. That's understood. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor White.
Okay, I'm looking to my colleagues for any other questions. I think my questions may fall into Councillor White's sort of line of questioning. I think really it's because as a scrutiny committee, we try to get to the sort of the detail and sort of know how to, in order to understand how well an initiative or something new policy is happening. So I'll ask my questions and I'm very happy that you take them away. So in recommendation 3, in making socio-economic a protected characteristic, I was going to ask how many people does this currently benefit? So how many people is this specifically helped?
Thanks, Councillor Connor. So the way that we are introducing that is to as a kind of the document kind of outlines to treat kind of low income as a set of circumstances that we will treat as a local protected characteristic. So the way that we have kind of chosen to define that, having kind of looked at a range of possible options, I should say, all of which have kind of different kind of benefits and kind of drawbacks, but kind of, I suppose, kind of reflecting our kind of our kind of emphasis on kind of on living wage. That is one of the ways that we are kind of defining sort of low income is being in receipt of kind of under kind of London kind of living wage. So you know, the way in terms of kind of the actual kind of numbers that kind of pertains to. You know, I could absolutely kind of go away and kind of look at what the most kind of recent kind of data is. So, for example, kind of historically, the kind of our kind of resident survey has asked that question to obtain local data, and we'll also have kind of London-wide data that that kind of gives an estimate of that kind of cohort size. You know, of course, if you were kind of thinking about kind of low income more widely, there would be a number of other kind of indicators that we could use. But I mean, I think it's kind of fair to say that it's, you know, there are significant, you know, a significant kind of proportion of Haringey kind of residents who would fall into that kind of category of subsisting on kind of under living wage. And what the introduction of the kind of local protected characteristic does is to ensure that, you know, when looking at the kind of the impact of our decisions, we take income into account in a direct manner. Previously, the expectation would have been that we would think about people with other kind of protected characteristics and the impact on them in an intersectional manner. So we should be thinking about kind of the circumstances of different groups, for example, by, you know, disability or ethnicity, in particular, kind of their incomes. But the introduction of kind of socioeconomic status, particularly, ensures that there is a more direct kind of line of sight or focus on that as part of our kind of decision making, and that's where we, you know, that was one of the kind of the reasons why you know, the recommendation was made in the first place, but we have also, you know, that we have kind of gone ahead and implemented it. And it's worth saying that kind of in doing that, we've kind of we've had a number of kind of conversations with kind of local stakeholders and kind of campaigners for you know, for this action, and we've kind of referred to kind of experience from on the part of an organisation called Just Fair that kind of looks at you know, kind of practice from, you know, well, campaigns for this, and has kind of brought kind of to light kind of, you know, kind of experience from other authorities who have taken sort of similar action. So that you know, that has all kind of informed the way that we have kind of designed and kind of structured the implementation of this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I know Councillor Carlin wants to come in on this question.
Hi, it's not specifically on this point, on that specific topic, but I feel that the report is presented as Pippa said. I feel that I was kind of expecting a lot more detail in terms of what our expectations were and what we wanted to achieve. So, for example, recommendation 8, to say that how we've dealt with it is that we've put up a Twitter feed is actually really disappointing, and that our transformation program in Customer First, we have a lot of people who cannot access customer services online, and at the moment they're waiting for an incredibly long amount of time to try and get through to the call centre, for example. So I'd quite like to see. I really feel that this report, I'm really sorry, but and I'm not sure if this is the only way that the fairness, you know, what has come out of the Fairness Commission. But I would like to see things like RAG rating, and I'd like to see exactly what you're anticipating in terms of you know, much more detailed targets. So so we've got evidently a resident panel. How many times, how many times a year are they expected to meet? When are, actually setting proper targets on each of these things, and then possibly us being able to look at whether those targets are that could be something that we kind of examine as a scrutiny panel. But I feel that the report as it is almost a narrative report. It doesn't have strong enough targets in terms of what you really want to achieve, and it doesn't really give us that much of an indication of exactly where we are on the line to achieving them, partly because we don't have strong enough targets. So it's not dealt with like what I'd really like to see, and I don't know if it's possible, and I know I'm coming into this really late because I wasn't that involved in the Fairness Commission itself. But it's treated a bit like a project. So, this is our project. The project is to implement the recommendations of the Fairness Commission, and then really to kind of look at what are the outcomes, what are the risk factors for each thing, how are we going to achieve it, etc. And I appreciate that that's quite a lot of work up front to take each of the recommendations and really think about them. But I feel that once that's been done, that piece of work has been done, it will be a lot easier further down the line of actually being able to measure each thing against whether we're actually achieving, because some of them are fine and some of them are quite clear, but I do think that some of them, disability action, we've created a disability rights, recommendation 7. So like, how's that impacted? What are we expecting out of that? Has that made any actual difference? I think the difficulty is that it's quite a broad, the Fairness Commission recommendations are quite broad and they're not really specific. So I think that's why that's the difficulty that you have in terms of how you're going to measure things up, because they're really broad. There are a lot of them, and they're not that, it's not like we want to get this number of people into this. We want to engage X number of people. We want to, it doesn't have that kind of structure around the actual Fairness Commission recommendations. But I think for it to be a relevant piece of work, we kind of need to put some of that in to think about what we want to see are the outcomes of it in a more structured way. Sorry.
Thank you for your question and your kind of comments, Councillor. And I do kind of understand. I understand the kind of the comments, absolutely. I wonder if it's kind of helpful if I kind of say a bit more about what we'd expect to be the next steps in terms of the kind of process for implementation. So I mean, I referred in my introduction kind of briefly to the expectation that kind of going forward, what we would expect to see is that implementations will be reflected in delivery planning on the part of the kind of council, where of course kind of the recommendations kind of pertain to kind of council activity. And what that will mean is that kind of as part of kind of the delivery planning, services or kind of directorates will say how well, there may be a degree of kind of interpretation of the recommendations. As you say, some of them are kind of broad and actually kind of engagement with kind of the recommendations and kind of what it means for our kind of, what we kind of prioritise and how we work will be really important. We'd like to see that kind of active engagement on the part of the kind of the organisation. But then as part of the delivery planning process, what you would then also expect to see is an articulation of how we will pursue the kind of the spirit or the kind of the letter of those recommendations through the activity defined in delivery planning. And attached to that, there will be a set of KPIs or kind of impact measures that kind of define what our aspirations are and how we will know if we are getting there. So at that stage, you can expect to see more specificity about where we are kind of implementing the kind of the recommendations, what, you know, how we will be able to kind of assess, I guess, quantitatively kind of our kind of progress, and you know, and so that will be one way. Also, you know, your kind of your point about kind of RAG grading. Again, we haven't kind of pinned down the kind of the detail of kind of how kind of going forward under kind of the delivery planning structure that we'll be putting in place as part of the new borough plan. You know, how that will look. But you know, my expectation is that we would have a way of easily kind of assessing kind of progress as part of that new delivery planning process as well. So I hope that's helpful kind of explanation. Claire, I don't know if there's anything that you would kind of add to that.
No, nothing to add. Unless to.
Sorry, we have got very little time left, so I'm just going to move on to Lords because she's got her hand up. Thank you.
Really, it's following on from Councillor Carlin's point about with regards to disability. I did attend the various sort of fairness groups, Fairness Commission groups with regards to disability, because I have got a disability. And I just sort of think that in recommendation 7, I mean, really, we need a lot more work done. The discussions that we had were so enthusiastic. We honestly thought that by now certain basics would at least come into place, like before every meeting, reasonable adjustments will be actually mentioned, that there'd be changes in the equality impact assessments. I mean, these were basics, because the other issues we were asking for were sort of, you know, for disability to become an issue with regards to housing, education. I mean, you know, and I know that there is a lot going on within the SEND sort of, you know, sector, but I think we need a lot more than sort of reference to the social model and DAH, because at the end of the day, DAH is an organisation now that sits within the voluntary sector. It's also funded by the local authority. But its function is not to actually assess what's going on within the internal structure of the local authority with regards to disability and what's required within the internal structure.
Thank you. That's really helpful, kind of, Lords, and I can understand your kind of point you're making there. I suppose what I can do certainly kind of for you know, future reporting kind of purposes is I think kind of revisit some of that kind of feedback and see where we'd expect to see kind of progress reports on it in relation to the specific recommendations. I suppose if there's a view, I'm really interested in the kind of the change that kind of that was kind of discussed in relation to EQIAs. I will look back on the notes and kind of pick up that detail. But certainly, if it's kind of not, if we don't feel that that's kind of reflected in recommendations in a way that kind of change will be kind of driven forward, that, you know, that is something that I'd be really kind of keen to you know, to see kind of implemented outside of that kind of that process. I suppose not everything that is said was said in those the discussions is reflected in kind of recommendations, but you know, where there are things that are important, we would absolutely want to act on them. In terms of kind of accessibility for kind of public meetings and kind of reasonable adjustments, you know, also kind of enormously kind of helpful. If there's specific kind of feedback relating to personal experiences or feedback or other experiences that people you know have had, I think we'd really welcome hearing about that, and we can kind of go away as well and kind of speak to kind of colleagues about kind of activity and train to ensure that is firmly built into the way that we work, both in kind of digital and face-to-face meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jean and Claire. So I'm going to sort of sum up with a couple of recommendations from the panel that I've heard tonight. So we've got Councillor Carlin's. I won't repeat it because I thought it was very eloquently put, and I don't think I can better that. So I think that's a useful, I hope, recommendation. because I know your first steps are obviously, you know, much more, or in a lot of places, much more worked out, but it's that next stage, isn't it? And I think we really do need to see the what the outcomes, how you're going to measure them, what the risk factors are. And I said I wouldn't repeat them, and I'm beginning to, so I shall stop. But I think that's an excellent recommendation that we need to see in any future report, so that we can judge, or we can begin to scrutinise, I think, not judge, but begin to scrutinise it in the way that I think actually would be really helpful. But the second one is that, and I think this is picking up on the point that Lords and others have made here tonight, is around areas where you've specifically gone out to groups, so disability groups, children. I noticed there's a couple of recommendations here, children and young people. It would be particularly helpful in those areas to maybe think about this sort of idea of co-producing. So you've obviously gone to those groups to begin with. You've got that first set of information, which is all about co-production when you initially go out and ask people what exactly they want. But I think the bit that we're missing here is that next stage of co-production, whereby those people are actively involved in, and I think you'll find you'll end up with a much better outcomes at the end if those groups are sort of kept within the process, so that terms of reference, the minutes, the actions from that. And then I think, yes, I think, to be honest, I think that might support what you're trying to achieve here. So that would be my second recommendation. Has anyone else got anything they want to add on this report? Okay, so thank you very much, Jean and Claire. We'll leave it there, because I note that the questions I had, I think, are just on data. So I can send them to you and won't add to the time here. But we've come to the end of our time. So thank you very much for your presentation. And yes, and we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Good night.
Okay, so moving on. So we're on to item 10, the scrutiny review into child poverty. We've got Councillor Gunas. It's on page 75 of the agenda pack. So over to you. This is your opportunity just to sort of give us a summary of what you want us to take from this. And then we'll open it up to the panel if there's any questions that they want to ask of you for clarity or anything else. So thank you to Councillor Gunas.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to basically highlight that the Children and Young People's Panel had a review on child poverty, because child poverty has increased nationally and also in Haringey. So during the COVID and also before that, and we kind of felt like it was a good area to find out more about it and to see what exactly the council is doing to elevate some of that. So despite the targets for the reduction by so there was a brief reduction in 2020 in the child poverty, but then the impact of poverty on children was profound, and because the impact on children is profound and long lasting, it's really important that it's not necessarily, it's taken seriously. Basically, it's not necessarily different or separate from the poverty that adults and families experience, because children are part of that, or they're often experiencing that as part of the household or family. So what this there were a number of recommendations that this report highlighted and would like to recommend. Basically, in order to address the kind of poverty, child poverty, in a kind of, we know that, or we understand that through the evidences that came out, that this is a national issue. Basically, any kind of, in order to support, in order to kind of prevent child poverty or to put measures to elevate that, there need to be a national campaign against that. But there are still, having said that, there's still something that we should and we could do locally as well. I think introduction of free school meal was one of them, and also customer services, responding to families, like being able to proactively identify families in need of support, because often it's the stigma, it's other issues that parents don't, or people don't volunteer to say, look, I'm struggling. So basically a number of different ways to actually proactively help families and those children to prevent child poverty. Obviously, as you know, the BARA plan is being updated currently, and the Children and Young People's panel felt very strong that the child poverty and clear actions to remedy that, or to needs to be actually in the local BARA plan. And the review basically looked at how child poverty could be addressed strategically within the refreshed BARA plan, and what kind of intervention that can be put in place to mitigate that. The growing cost of living and the crisis on the fuel crisis, or the cost of living, or the crisis of cost of living, when we consider all those impacts on families on low income, and so these needs to be basically thought through, and there need to be a strategic approach to that. So I will leave it there, and just to say that I submit the report for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guinness. And it's quite a detailed report with quite a number of recommendations in key areas. Thank you for that. I'll just ask my colleagues if there's any questions on the report. Yes, I've got Yvonne.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I just want to say that around this poverty of these children and mostly some of the younger families, it really is getting out of hand, because some of these children are really hungry, so much so that we have set up a food bank here. And from Easter last year until January this year, well, end of December after Christmas, we delivered 1,500 hampers that we've gathered together. It was done by the cadets more than anything. And I think to myself that if Haringey are going to continue down this vein, then the people here in the east of the borough, mainly the M15 and N17 and M4, are people that are in need of a great deal of help. So much so that we have one school that we're going to deliver about 20 hampers, in the next few weeks. And I think it's sad that it's come to this stage in this time of the year that we are still having to try and find food and everything for these children, because at the end of the day, you're not going hungry, I'm not going hungry, and I only have a pension, and yet my family are fed. But some of these children, when I was talking to a couple of them just before Christmas, they hadn't had a Christmas present for last year, or this year they wasn't going to get one, and they hadn't had a piece of chocolate for 2 years, because stuff is so difficult for them to get hold of. They're big families, some of them, so you can understand it. But I think Haringey needs to really sort of try and make some headway in trying to feed these children, especially in the holidays, because that's when they get really, really hungry.
That's Lagunas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution, Yvonne. I just wanted to, obviously, you were also part of this report with us as part of the committee as well. So one of the key recommendations, going forward, is that if we are kind of serious about elevating poverty, it has to be a key priority within the refreshed borough plan, and there need to be some clear kind of ways that how are we going to do that? What is going to be put in place to remedy that, to basically deliver that? I know obviously food banks has increased, and there are lots of local food banks that are providing food, but all of those are basically in, it's based on donation, and it needs to be like, there need to be a long-term solution, long-term kind of solution for the growing problem. And whether it's within the schools, I think all the key partners, school, families, council, and they need to come together to basically be able to support those families who are struggling to feed their families. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor White and Councillor Carlin also have got questions.
Yeah, mine's more of a comment than a question, really. Just to say that I think this is a good report with some good recommendations, and I'm really particularly about the hidden costs of schooling, and which is recommendation 8, I think, and recommendation 6 is it, which to recommend that the free school meals are rolled out to make them universal, which is an outstanding manifesto commitment of this administration, and I think that's really, really important because I mean, ever since I was at school, which was a long, long time ago now, there was a clear divide between those children who were receiving free school meals and those who weren't, and it's a clear stigma. So I think the principle of universal provision is really, really important, so as not to mark people out as lower class citizens. So I think we really, as a council, need to strain every sinew to, and I know it's difficult because I know it's expensive, but we really need to try and do all we can to find a way to fulfil that manifesto commitment. So if that can't happen now before the election in May, then after May, I think it needs to be a key priority for the council.
Thank you, Councillor White, for that comment. And I just wanted to say that basically the panel felt really strong about the idea of children receiving at least one warm meal, good quality, healthy warm meal a day, with, like you said, without stigma being attached. So that was, it felt like it's basically, if we are thinking about child poverty, free school meal should be at the heart of that, because it is inclusive. The universal aspect of it makes it, there's less stigma attached, and children are all together. And also it's a warm, one healthy meal a day, which could obviously help those children a lot. So we felt, the panel felt very, very strong about that recommendation, and that was one of the reasons that inclusive and also healthy one meal could make a huge difference. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin.
Thanks. Yes, I think universal free meals are a great aspiration, and I certainly championed that prior to our previous manifesto conference, but and hopefully we will reach there eventually. But I think what I wanted to ask you was, we're looking at these kind of physical things like, are children fed, and cost of school day, getting to school. But did you consider digital access at all? Because my huge concern is that, and we saw it during the pandemic, is that for young people who do not have access to the internet at home, their educational prospects are absolutely blighted. You cannot, it's almost impossible now. I don't know how children do well at school if they don't have access to the internet at home. Everything assumes that they should have by secondary school. And if they don't have it, they are at such a disadvantage, an educational disadvantage. So I was wondering whether you had taken evidence on that, and how how strongly the panel felt about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carlin, for that question. I thought there was a recommendation on digital divide and digital poverty, like addressing the digital poverty. I think that's a really important, also very important comment. Panel, like if we want those children to be, able to access their schoolwork or be successful in their schoolwork, do their research and so on, they do need to have digital equipments and just to support their education. And the children who tend to not have those devices can be disadvantaged, and I just can't find it in exact location, but I thought there was a specific one addressing that. I just wanted to see that. I think yes, what I'm trying to say is that
3.
panel did actually, that was also an important. I
think on recommendation 3 you make reference to digital.
Yes, digital
but
access.
It's in relation to the council customer services rather than I think what you were saying, Councillor Carlin, about internet at home and access maybe to laptops, etc.
I do also think that our growth in the attainment gap that we've seen over the pandemic is so much down to the fact that kids in wealthier households will all have access to a laptop and computers at home. And the kids who don't, during the pandemic, when libraries were closed and schools were closed, they were just, there was nothing that they could do, and I know that we did roll out, some, the mobile phone operators were giving free, mobile phones, and we did as a council roll some of that out. But I do think that gap was very much down to digital access. And I think it's almost become, in terms of poverty and poverty reduction, it's become really important. It's become, it's between the haves and the have-nots, and there's such a huge divide. And then it goes, for adults, it goes down to job searching and all that kind of stuff, being able to do courses and things. But for kids at school to not have that now they have no chance. So, thank you.
One of the key focus of report was basically the direct kind of poverty, food poverty, and the impact of that on child's psychological, like educational, psychological, and overall development. And most of the kind of panel, most of the basically people who attended the evidence gathering session, the panels were made around those areas. And we did look at it in a sort of general way as well, like the level of poverty. It's like digital divide is definitely an issue of poverty too, but we were mainly focusing on the food, housing, and what kind of services do we have within the community that council is providing, that parents and families can just go and access and be signposted and helped, supported. So we were mainly kind of focusing on that area. But I do completely recognize that digital divide is an issue of poverty too. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I was just going to ask Philip, as the officer present, so if, because these are draft recommendations and this is the draft section, so if Councillor Guinness has done some sort of, wider conversation and then based on the discussion tonight would like to sort of make a recommendation in that around digital poverty, I suppose, that's what you were saying, wasn't it, about not having access. Is that, is she able now to add a section in here tonight around a recommendation around, concentrating on that and maybe the catch up as well? I'm just thinking you're saying about not having access to laptops and the internet, but also what the catch up provision is for our children that, are sort of substantially disadvantaged. If you know, anyway, it's just a quick question, and I don't know what the answer is, so I'm going to ask Philip. Thank you.
Okay, so I think my initial response would be it's difficult at this stage to start adding recommendations into the report. I think it's important that, although the points that raised are very valid and very much in line with the review, I think it's important that the conclusions of the review reflect the evidence that they heard, and without us being there as part of the evidence gathering process, to add recommendations in at this stage seems sort of the wrong way around. And I think this may be something
sorry, Philip, I just meant if they had taken evidence, but it was more general, or is there something they could add now to say that they're for a future recommend, future maybe looking into this, you might recommend that.
Yes, I just wanted to say that obviously this recommendation are like we are kind of revising and updating the borough plan. So I'm just guessing, or I'm pretty certain that digital divide will be at the heart of the problem, like in terms of like featuring in that borough new updated borough plan. So if it's not, then I think we can take that's recommendation is definitely worth taking forward, that we really need to that needs to be sort of brought back in a maybe future panel meeting, or added somehow to that recommendation that will go into updating of the borough plan.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So that's an OSC recommendation. So that's a very good way around that. And yeah, I think that sits nicely in the borough plan. Okay, Councillor White.
Yeah. I was just going to suggest that rather than amending the report, that we make if we can make separate recommendations, as you pretty much outlined, that we do it as an outcome of this meeting rather than amending the report.
Okay, well that's agreed. So thank you so much, Councillor Guinness, for your very detailed report and the discussion that's led to further recommendation from OSC about the borough plan, specifically around digital poverty for the child, around the internet and access, and maybe catch up as well, the catch up provision. Okay, so thank you. So we're going to move on now to the scrutiny review on the future of Seven Sisters Market, and that's Councillor White's report. So over to you to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. So just to outline why we embarked on this brief review, at our the September meeting of the panel, we received 2 deputations, one from a group of market traders and one from the Seven Sisters West Green Development Trust, who are the body that are pushing forward the community plan, which the council has expressed support for since the withdrawal of Granger from the development. So the traders group that came to us were not entirely comfortable with the council's position of support, what they viewed as supporting one group of traders. They didn't feel that the Development Trust was entirely representative of all the traders, themselves included, and they raised with us that there were divisions among the traders, and they were concerned that the council's approach might lead to a situation where it's almost like the council was taking sides between among traders. So, having heard from both of those deputations, the panel decided to conduct a brief review, hear evidence, and see if we could come up with some recommendations focused on what the council can do to facilitate the best outcome for all of the traders, the current traders at the market, and the wider community, and also maybe to help heal the divisions that we heard about. Of course, this is all keeping in mind that the site is owned by Transport for London, not by the council, although the council has historical involvement in the in the development, the now historic Granger development, through the development agreement it had with Granger and the agreement to compulsorily purchase in order to assemble the land for the wider development. So we came up with a number of recommendations which are outlined in the report. I don't think I need to go through them here because I think committee members will have had a chance to read them. So I suppose I will leave it there for now and see what committee members have to ask.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to say I thought it was a very well written report. It was very clear as to what the issues were and what your thoughts and recommendations were as a panel. So opening up to colleagues, any questions specifically on this?
Can I just say, because I forgot to say, just to respond to what you just said, the responsibility for the clarity of the report and the recommendations lies with Philip, who did an absolutely fantastic job in turning our discussions into a coherent report. So thank you very much. Many warm thanks to Philip for that.
It's good to have credit where credit's due, indeed. So opening up, I've got a question. Is that, Yvonne, is that a legacy hand? Just to ask, because you're on screen. Please do.
Right, the reason I want to say tonight is that the Bridge Renewal Trust is the successor body of the NDC. Now, when this development was set up, around about 2002, 2003, the NDC paid Granger over £2 million to do a redevelopment on Ward's Corner, i.e. flats. So much so that one side of West Green, one side of Suffield Road, which is backs onto there, most of those properties the council bought on the understanding that that would become part of the development. And I know it to be true because I used to own number 30 in that road. I was also part of the NDC, and I've been fighting all these years because Granger took the 2 million and they were supposed to invest that in the housing along with the council. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And as far as I'm concerned, that 2 million should be paid back, not to the NDC, but to the successor body of the Bridge Renewal Trust. Now, I don't know how this is going to work. Does it mean that we have to say goodbye to £2 million, which belonged to the residents in that small part of South Tottenham? It was given to them as to actually build and revitalise that as much as possible. We did a lot of work and it was hard work, and it's still going on today. So I would like to ask as to who do we go to get that £2 million paid back with interest to the Bridge Renewal Trust.
Thanks, Yvonne, for your question. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give you an answer to that question myself. In actual fact, the kind of the remit of this review, this kind of terms of reference, were a bit more narrowly focused. They were specifically on the future of the market site, which is the bit of land that's owned by TfL. Right over the station. What we weren't looking at was the kind of historic facts of the history of the kind of the Granger development, which is on a much wider footprint, covering the whole, like the Suffield Road, West Green Road, Seven Sisters Road, High Road kind of that's the kind of area that covers. What it does say in the report is that this is an area in terms of like the future of that site, that wider development and what could happen there. That is something that my panel might want to look at in the future, whether that's under my leadership or under somebody else in the future. But in terms of getting an answer to your question specifically about that money, that's not something that the panel has looked at, so I can't give you an answer to that, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Yvonne, hang on. So is it possible, Councillor White, to take that as a question through to your panel and just ask it as part of Cabinet questions at the next panel meeting?
Yes, with the proviso that obviously I don't know even if I'm going to be a councillor after May, because the voters have to decide that. But yeah, perhaps that could be taken as a note and passed on to. I mean, I'm happy to pick that up if I am the panel chair after May, but maybe that can be passed on as a note for whoever is, if not me.
Can I just come back in there?
Yes, Yvonne. Carry on.
I did speak to Ruth Gordon about it because she was involved at the time, and she told me that the only money that we may get back is about £1,000. Well, unfortunately, I'm not prepared to let it go. I know I'm only a co-opted member on here, but I've lived in South Tottenham there for 75 years, and I have no intention in letting the council and Granger take that money away from the NDC when they did not do the project that the money was paid for. That money needs to go back to the Bridge Renewal Trust now as the successor body of the NDC. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Yvonne, I've just spoken to Philip, and I think probably what's going to be helpful is we take as an action OSC, because we've heard at OSC, you're completely right, you've raised it, so we'll take as an action to ask officers to give a response to that question. Okay, so that you'll get an answer via OSC. Okay, thank you, Yvonne, and thank you for that. Sorry, yeah, Councillor Guinness.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make a general kind of comment and observation that I've just read the report and the recommendation, and I think it's a really good report, and some of the recommendation are basically needed and I think well timed. Especially the recommendation on 4.17 that the Cabinet needs to seek assurances about the either whoever is going to take the lease of the area of the market needs to make sure that they're working absolutely well with all the traders and in a consensus way, and everybody is kind of happy and feels supported, because as a ward councillor to Ward's Corner, for last 80 years, I have seen lots of dispute, lots of disagreement, and the grievance and difficulties that the traders were in. So I think this is an absolute, really, I welcome this point very much, and I think it will help that historical problem that the traders were having, whether, Granger's contracted someone else or whoever comes into that area, they need to make sure that that project has all the traders, treatment of all the traders at its heart. So I just wanted to leave it there. Thank you for that, Matt.
Thank you. Any other questions on the report? No. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Guinness.
Oh.
Thank you. Okay, so we're happy to accept the report, and thank you very much for coming to present it tonight to us.
Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you, Yvonne, for your questions. As I said, we'll take those as an action and get a report back to you. Okay, so that'll come through from our committee. So moving on, we've got the scrutiny review into adult social care and commissioning. That's mine. So I'm going to talk to this. Oh, I've got the wrong one here. Right. Yes. So this is a report that was started a few years ago now. It had to be paused due to the pandemic. It was restarted. It's been a bit stop-start. So we've had some interesting times with it, and several councillors have come and gone over the period of time. So at the outset, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who stuck with this, because it was over a long period. We started off with looking at commissioning. But I have to say, after a few sessions with officers, we quickly realised this was an enormous remit and not one that we were actually going to be able to tackle in any usefulness, we thought, as a whole. So one of the areas that came up quite quickly, actually, and then followed through, was around co-production. So we actually decided to hone in on co-production, and we've really given some recommendations, I hope, to the council around a proper charter and framework for co-production. This is something that is happening a lot more in the council now. We're hearing it in health as well. It's a lot more in our partners working. This term co-production is being bandied around, but actually a lot of our residents were quite frustrated because some of them were in areas where we were doing co-production really well, and some were sort of in projects where co-production wasn't happening so well, and we thought there's a really good opportunity for the council sort of structure, put it into some sort of structure and framework around how co-production would happen, and then share good practice across the council so that our residents had a good experience whichever project they were involved in. So we've given some quite detailed recommendations, just to think, because I think this sort of gets to the heart of maybe some of the areas that for a while we think we've been doing, but not necessarily actually happening. The Joint Partnership Board is a really important independent board where it has a lot of the reference groups for our residents, with the old and frailer reference group, mental health reference group, disability reference group. However, we didn't feel there was a sort of a particularly joined up approach to what was happening, and more support was needed for the Joint Partnership Board to really support those residents and any officers that came to them and wanted to do some co-productive work. So we've made some recommendations around that. We've also then done some other sort of recommendations at the end of the report around local workforce, council website, locality-based forums, and career progression for care workers. There's a little bit more innovative ideas. These came from various members as we were going through about a pilot project for an in-house care team. And one recommendation that has come up, and I have to say it's come up in a number of scrutiny committees now in adult social care, is about written information for care assessments, just sort of the real basics that people in our borough absolutely want. So there's some very practical ones here. And the last one was on social value. It's in our commissioning, a lot of our commissioning projects, they're saying, oh, we're doing, 10% is social value, but nobody's really sure what social value is. So in some areas they're defining it in one way, in others they're less sure. So as we're using the term in commissioning, it was an incredibly useful thing to define, we thought, and would help in the future. So that's it in a nutshell. We're very passionate as the Adults and Social Adult Scrutiny Panel in co-production and getting this not only embedded in adults, but across, as I said, the entire council. And we heard some excellent work, I think, earlier. I think Councillor Goodness, you were saying happening in children's with one of the officers coming to speak to you. So I think this is a timely report. I think there's a big push in the council for using co-production more effectively. And I think it's something that our residents have been calling out for, and would give them a voice, not only in the outset of the project, but throughout the process, and then to monitor into the future. So 5, 10, 15, however many years, to have a sort of really strong group that can really sort of make sure that the delivery is still what we were intending, or they were hoping for, to be honest. And it's basically doing what it says on the tin. And I'm going to stop there and over to you for questions. Councillor White.
Yeah, thanks. Again, it's more of a comment than a question. Just to say, I'm really happy to see. It's been a long time. I was actually on the panel when this was first started. I was just looking back. I came to maybe a couple of the initial evidence sessions. So I'm really happy to see this report now, and I think some of the recommendations are focused on kind of pinning down exactly what is meant by co-production, which I think is quite an important thing. We're hearing a lot about co-production. It seems like it's almost like a mantra that every and you know, I totally agree that our residents need to be involved. Our stakeholders need to be involved in designing our services, but it's really good that this review is recommending that we have a proper structure, a proper definition of what it is, how it works, and how we go about it. So that's really great, and I'm really also very happy to see recommendation 16 about setting up a pilot project for an in-house care team. I'd be really keen to see that recommendation get accepted and progressed and see how that works. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Guinness.
Yeah, I was just going to make a very short comment, just to say that it's a very timely report, as you said, and I think we really need to understand how the co-production is going to be implemented, and it's gonna, so it's very timely, and I just welcome the report, and thank you for suggesting or bringing clarity to what exactly co-production is, how it's supposed to be implemented, how people are supposed to understand and make use of this new engagement tool to kind of better communicate with council officers. So I just wanted to say that it's very timely and very well focused. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the whole panel were sort of really keen that we often go around to residents groups, don't we, and we ask them things, we consult and engage, but again, but we then don't feel part of the process. So where does our voice go? Where do our thoughts and opinions, where do they go into the ether? So you're right, pinning them down on things like terms of reference and minutes and actions, I think was really, I think hopefully residents will really appreciate that, and that's been asking for that for a while. I've got Lords' hand up. Lords, do you want to come in?
I really, like others, really welcome this report. It's been a long time coming because I think that I've got notes going back to 2015 where I was in various meetings where the word was being used. And I think also, my concern, one of my concerns is that the word is used now really a lot without clarification. So now, hopefully, this document will reduce the amount of times that it is used and only allow for it to be used when it should do. However, I do have some concerns which I think should be noted. And in the document, several examples are given where co-production has supposedly been used. I fully agree, and I've heard such wonderful reports about how the Autism Hub was developed and is now up and running, and where co-production was certainly a very valuable tool in getting that hub actually opened. I think also I'm involved and have been for some time now in the redesign of Osborne Grove. However, I do not think that the example of DAH should be there, because DAH in some ways was not co-produced. It was very much a local authority-led project. The local authority wanted this project, and therefore it then was, because the local authority was so forceful, I think that in some ways what we had was not co-production, but we had a situation where the organisation that we now have has been framed very much and designed by the local authority, not through the process of co-production. So going to the recommendations, I think that my concern is how do you reconcile differences that may emerge from what the local authority wants as an outcome to that of the community group where there's differences. And I think that's an area that maybe needs to be looked at a little bit more.
So thank you, Lords, and I note your comments around your concerns around us including this as part of the co-production process. I think in the discussion we were having, I just wanted to check with you if you thought that changed any of the recommendations itself, the information provided in the report. So I'm just going to do that bit, and then I'll move on to the other areas that you've also highlighted.
No. It doesn't alter. I mean, if anything, in the section on DAH, one of the issues that is commented upon is where the local authority is the funder, and that possibly also maybe needs more interrogation, more discussion, because I think that does create certain differences for a voluntary sector organisation that may want to go a very different way. But I think I've covered that, before in my but I think it is noted within the report. So I fully support the recommendations of the report, but I think it's just that for readers in the future, if this document is going to go public like it should, then I think people might my worry is that people might think that the whole setting up of DAH was done through co-production.
No, I completely take that. So what we'll do is we'll take your comments that you've made this evening, and we'll we'll check them with you, obviously, before we put them in, and we can add that. I think I was checking with my scrutiny officer earlier. We can add comment from yourself around your concerns in this area, so that will be part and parcel. Because I think my officer said it earlier, Dominic, it was a draft, until it's agreed by OSC tonight. So I think tonight we'll agree that you wanted those comments added in around your concerns around the DAH being co-produced.
I think
correct?
Yes.
Okay. In a nutshell, obviously we'll flesh out exactly what the wording is, but I think that you just wanted that added, didn't you, to the pack, so that you had that in there. So yeah, okay.
Because I think also it does take. Sorry, I can hear myself echoing. It also takes from the other two examples, really, which are very, very clear and very, very focused and really good examples. So if people wanted to go to them to see what good practice actually means, it's and then there's criticisms in the community, because I know that some people have been rather shocked by the report that I've sent to them tonight, by some of the comments that it's been.
No, that's really helpful, Lords, and that's the reason we bring these reports to OSC and to have that conversation as we've had this evening. So I've completely noted your concerns, and we'll add some comment in that. Obviously, Dominic will check with you the format of the words to be put in, if that's okay with you.
Yes, definitely. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. But in the future, I think actually if there is the charter, if there is the framework, and there is the oversight as suggested, hopefully these sorts of issues won't arise. So all hope. Okay, so thank you. Are we happy to agree the report? Excellent review. Okay, so the second one, I'm afraid, is me again. So we did a scrutiny review into sheltered housing regarding access to health and social care services. So this came about, to be honest, from members and around casework that we have had over the years around issues arising with our residents in sheltered housing. So we were looking at the support they were having around input from health professionals and social care in order to ensure that they are supported and they have a healthy healthy lifestyle, and they get all the services that they should be getting if they were out in, you know, in all normal flats and houses in our community. So we had some really interesting recommendations from this. Primarily, there's the new localities approach in Haringey, which I think has been coming out in adults and health, with our health and social care partners more actively involved in going into sheltered housing, and especially the mental health teams that are within the localities teams. So this is all about that joined up approach between the council and the health service, and actually ensuring that sheltered housing is on their list, an area that they should be going into, and actively engaging with our residents in that area. Particularly, we've got a change in cohorts. We were discovering as we went out to speak to residents in different sheltered housing. It was an older, frailer population, and it does seem to now there's sort of younger clients with quite high-end needs, sort of health needs and care needs. So there was different groups now within sheltered housing, and I think there was a concern that people with specific high needs weren't getting the health and care support that they needed, and also the older, more vulnerable residents weren't feeling that they were getting their sort of social support and access to services to keep themselves healthy and hopefully happy. So we've made some very specific recommendations in this around local area coordinators, the locality working, around the managers and how that should, and we actually even put in, I think, on repairs. I think there might even be a recommendation in there, repairs, because I think that caused quite a lot of upset with people. And then around the hub and spoke system, I think there was a lot of evidence that people in the sort of, you were in a hub, the centre, you got more access to sort of different services, but in the spokes, you know, they were the sort of, you know, they didn't get quite as much, or they didn't, you know, appear to get access to the hub. And there was an issue around transport to get people to these things if they wanted it to happen. So I think, again, we made quite a, I'm just checking where it is now, but it was quite a significant recommendation. Again, it says about Homes for Haringey should ensure the co-production group that we suggested should be set up includes wide representation from sheltered housing steering group across the borough, and should be attended by senior members of staff from Homes for Haringey, social care and the localities team. So, and then sort of can report up to the borough partnership. It was basically to get one person, one resident from each of the sheltered housing schemes into a specific like co-production group alongside the team that would be there to go in to support them, and actually for them to have regular meetings so they can bring up issues and address these straight to the senior members and hopefully get it resolved at a much earlier date. I think residents felt like sometimes they were shouting into the wind and nothing was ever happening. That seemed to be a large frustration. So I'm going to stop there and open for questions.
Sorry, if I could come in. Thank you. I think this is quite a timely report. We know that we have a lot of casework. Hornsey or NOTAF, that does include some of our overlap as a large hub. Did you take evidence on how the hubs were actually working at all? I know that you spoke, because, for example, I noticed that, you know, we know that in Hornsey all the activities and things are carried out at Beedale House. It can be very difficult for people to get there. And it used to be that people used to have activities carried out in their own location. So that's kind of been pared down, and not everyone can get to the activities anymore. But I think it's a really timely report, and I'm glad we're going to be that there are recommendations to keep focusing on it and what you do with it going forward. So thank you. Yes.
Councillor Guinness.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I completely echo what Councillor Carling said. It's very timely and it's a very good report that we really need some, we needed to kind of have a better understanding of our sheltered houses. I noticed that obviously there are a number of sheltered houses in Tottenham Green are also listed there. And I just wanted to say that I completely support and agree with all the recommendation, but the one in particularly about repair is a very important one, even though it's not directly within the services of social care services. But I remember having to deal with the lift repair in Sophia House was a pretty big battle. So we really need to, like, often it's like they don't, like council doesn't understand that some people, it's like they have some residents have walking issues. If they don't have the lift, they cannot leave their room, they cannot leave their flat. And it's really, really vital that all the repair jobs are attended to in a timely way and dealt with it. But yes, I welcome the report. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I agree. Actually, it does have often quite a direct impact on people's health and well-being, doesn't it? In all sorts of ways. So yes, any other? Is it Councillor White?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just on recommendation 9, it just, I mean, it should go without saying, shouldn't it, really? You know, that updates be automatically provided when a repair date is scheduled or changed. And, you know, this shouldn't just be limited to sheltered housing. It should be all residents of council housing, homes for Haringey. Unfortunately, as we've heard on the Housing and Regen Scrutiny panel, that isn't the case. But yeah, it shouldn't just be sheltered housing. It should be for everyone. And frankly, we shouldn't need to make the recommendation. It just should happen automatically. It should go without saying.
Indeed, and I think our email boxes are full of people who are chasing up repairs. Again, of course, there's a look to bring Homes for Haringey back in house. I think this is why we also looked at this as a timely report, because you know any sort of move, we thought, well, if this sort of structure was built in at the outset, then it would hopefully significantly improve people's lives within our sheltered housing, which is what we all want as councillors. Okay, so I'm going to move the report, and everyone happy? Agreed? Okay, thank you so much. So that comes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I've got the hand up. Yvonne, I think. Oh, Yvonne, you're on twice. Yvonne, do you want to ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that I live in an adapted property and it took me 18 months to get a sewerage leak, which was in my flat, completed. So I know what these sheltered people are going through, because I do meet quite a lot of them, and they're always telling me, you know, they can't get their work done, they can't get this done. And my mum lived in sheltered accommodation by Tottenham Cemetery, and she died with her toilet being overflowing all the time, and she'd waited over a year. So it's not a surprise to me that things like this are still going on. It seems that from one resident, she said to me, when you get over 80, Yvonne, they forget you exist and they just leave you there with all of that to die in heartache. And I agree with them now, because I know exactly what they're going through.
Okay, Yvonne, thank you for that. That's incredibly sad to hear, and quite powerful. And I think, you know, for us on Scrutiny, it's good. Hopefully we can give people a voice when they feel they're not being heard, and as I said, put that framework in place. And hopefully this will be looking to improve that sort of situation. Lord, you've come on screen, so I'm assuming you've got your hand up. Thanks.
In the report, the focus is on Homes for Haringey, and I've raised the issue several times at all different meetings, including JPB, with regards to the fact that there's housing associations that actually sort of provide what is called sheltered housing or sometimes assisted living, and we never look at those. And I think that sort of maybe we need another report to look at precisely what is sort of going on within that sector, because where my aunt is, some very vulnerable people are being placed there. There's no support, there's no supervision, there's no monitoring. And I know that sort of the Housing Association has more or less accepted this, and they are going to change the management structure. But I'm exhausted. I think the only person that has taken any interest is yourself. So I think that sort of, you know, I think that the local authority needs to look also at those housing sort of projects where support supposedly on paper exists but doesn't exist in reality, and they're not run by Homes for Haringey, they're run by other housing associations.
Thank you, Lords. That's a really good point. And I think because of the time we had, and we also had the other scrutiny review ongoing as well, it was quite difficult. So we did have to narrow it down. But I do take your point, and I think, yes, in the future, I think, you know, whoever sits in these seats, that's a good one to sort of add in. You know, we could sort of recommend that a future work programme looks at this, either maybe in housing or in adults and health, depending on which way we're going to be addressing it. But as I said, as Councillor White said, we don't know who's going to be sitting in these seats, but we can certainly say that a recommendation from OSC is that this is looked at and given consideration within the panels for future years' work programme. Thank you, Lords, for that. Okay, and with that, I'm going to close this part. We're going on to the work programme update, which we have got. Philip, if you're introducing the report, is on page 205. Thank you.
Yeah, so I won't really say very much. Obviously, you have the work programme for the committee and the panels in front of you. This is the last meeting of the municipal year, so it's really just to note the work that the committee and the panels have done over the past 12 months. And I guess the only ask is, are there any agenda items that the committee thinks would like to put forward for the first meeting of next year, just in terms of there isn't a great deal of time after the elections and stuff to sort of pull. So it's quite helpful if we have a couple of agenda items to put forward at this stage.
Okay, so I've got possible items to be allocated to, no, as part of OSC, I'm looking at adults and health. Have we got a list of, so I've got fire safety in high-rise blocks, Brexit and consultation, engagement and co-production on the list. Is do you know of any more, Philip, or is that?
What you're looking at is the items on the work programme that have that were put as a sort of as general future items for discussion. Yeah. I think that they've come to the committee before and they're due a follow up at some point. Okay. Yeah.
So is there anything? Does the committee want to take any sort of anything to follow up of an item that they've had before? There's fire safety in high-rise blocks. I mean, at the moment, I don't know if you know, but as part of overview scrutiny, we looked at the fire safety. Is it the fire safety report that comes through? So when we're doing estate inspections, and I'm still on. Though this was recommended through OSC a number of years ago now, I'm still trying to get the Homes for Haringey estate inspections to join up with the fire safety officers to give us the fire risk assessment report to come through, so that every time a councillor goes to any estate inspection, they will automatically, as part of their pack, be sent the full fire risk assessment report. Because you can get the small one, but it actually doesn't give you any detail or useful detail for a councillor to really sort of question officers about what's going on within that estate.
Sorry, do we get Homes for Haringey officers to come to give evidence? Because I sit on the Homes for Haringey board and we get quite detailed reports on fire safety by block.
Yes, you do, but the fire risk assessments for each estate that you go to as a councillor, so each one of us all go to our different estates with our Homes Fire and officer, and you then specifically have to request this the fire risk assessment in full for each of your estates you're going to visit, rather than it being automatically just given to you as part of the pack, almost, you know. So if they say, well, you're going to, say, the Priory, then automatically you'll get the fire risk assessment that you can click on, open and see, and so that when you go on the estate inspection, you can ask questions and sort of challenge and sort of, without that, it's very difficult, and especially for new councillors coming in. There may be new councillors, and if new councillors come in, you know, it's again sort of making sure that. So, anyway, so I'm getting to the point where I've got an agreement that this should happen, but no one's actually made it happen yet. So it's a level of frustration. But this did come through OSC about, was it 2 or 3 years ago? The fire review. I'm looking at Philip.
Yes, it was. I think there was 2 different reports.
Yes. So I don't know if we wanted to put that on as an agenda item to see if we can get that updated, or have members got anything else they'd like to add at this point that would cover? No. Councillor Goodall.
I was just going to say, especially if there was a broader kind of report or investigation into fire safety regulation and in each individual block of flats. So it would be really good to go what was done and what happened to that information and recommendation that came out of that report. Like if they can be updated and that information is at hand, it's ready, like each block of flats, whether they had their fire safety inspection or not. So I think that will be, it might not be a huge piece of work. I'm just saying if there was actually previously some detailed work done. Secondly, I know we're talking about this item specifically. I also wanted to make a recommendation in regards to Fairness Commission. I think I didn't, obviously, at that time, I think all of you made some really valuable contribution. That the report itself, it doesn't really give us like indication of what's been implemented, what's happening with others, and how it's going to be, because obviously the borough plan is being updated, and how much of it is going into that and what is changing, basically. A bit more detailed kind of report ahead of the meeting would be really good, because I remember Fairness Commission was one of the flagship of this kind of administration, and a lot of work went into that, incredible amount of work and engagement. So it would be really good to have a detailed explanation and report on where things are, how things have been implemented.
Okay, well that sounds sensible, because actually whoever's sitting on this panel, I think that wouldn't be a bad place to start, to be honest, because that links some big areas in quite nicely. So yes, I think that I'd be happy to put that on the work programme. So that and sort of fire. That's a good start. Yeah, and the fire safety review, looking at specifically around councillor engagement on the individual, as well as the update borough-wide on our buildings to ensure we're sort of complying with with all the new standards that are coming through. Okay, so there's 2 things, so that's probably enough, isn't it, Philip, to be getting on with? Yeah. Okay. Unless anyone's got anything else. Oh, sorry, Lords, you've got your hand up.
With the fire safety, could we also spend some time looking at the removal of the cladding from the blocks on, my son lives, in a block where it's going to take 3 years before his block has even got around for the cladding to be. So we've all put in, campaigns for the cost to be covered by the builder, but yet those tenants in, Tottenham Hale are still having to pay the most enormous costs in terms of insurance, etc. And, you know, they're going to have to wait a number of years for that work to be done. But I think that it would really fit in really well with fire safety if we're looking at that as a subject.
Yes, I'm happy to add that in. I think I'm just going to check with you, Lords. Is that something that the council has any? Is this a council block, or is this a no? Okay, okay. So we'll be putting in a separate, because we did a huge thing on. Okay, so we'll put in a specific request around that, because I think in the past we've tended to focus in, haven't we, on the council blocks, but I think we can also widen it out to have a look at what else is happening in the borough and the impact it's having on people, leaseholders and renters in particular in these blocks, and what can be done.
I think it is, particularly in terms of the actual insurance, because it's the private leaseholders that are having to sort of pay enormous sums of money. I mean, we're having to help our son pay that amount of money, and that will continue until that cladding is removed. So we've won one battle, but there's still a long way to go with regards to that issue. And I think that sort of, you know, it is in Tottenham Hale, and I think we should be promoting Tottenham Hale in a very positive way, and be seen as a local authority supporting people, whether they're in council property or private or leasehold property.
Okay, thanks, Lords. We've got all that. Well, I'm saying I'm looking at the officer, Philip. Philip has noted all that. So that can go as suggestions. Yvonne, is your hand up for a suggestion?
I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yes, you can. We have a fire officer come every year and check all the balconies and all the rooms and make sure that everything is up to scratch. And the last 4 years, we've had a clean bill of health from them. And he then sends the report to Homes for Haringey to say that he's been and done the work. Hello?
Okay, that's good. That sounds positive. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Was that what you wanted to let us know?
Yeah, because you know, it's just a point of that. If you're a block representative, it's good, because then you can make sure nothing's left outside the front doors or anything like that. No, you can't have barbecues on the balcony anymore. So it's worked out really well.
Okay, thank you for that, Yvonne. That's really helpful. It's good to get that feedback. Okay, so the last bit I was just going to check with officers is we had as an OSC the gambling inquiry. Just to update that we've had that initial inquiry, and Philip, is there anything we wanted to add on what we're doing about the recommendations from that? Or next steps?
Yes, I mean, I think we sort of, with the gambling inquiry, I believe there was an evidence session held a week or so ago, or possibly the week before that. Given that where we are in the year and what's happening with we're about to enter the pre-election period, I would suggest this is probably something to roll over to May onwards. I guess I'll let Dominic come in fact, if he wants to pick this up about, I don't know. Anyway, I'll let Dominic come in.
Thank you. Yes, it was just to say that so the gambling inquiry day was held on the 8th of March, and we circulated the notes from that on the 9th, and there's still got full notes, and there's also some written evidence provided as well. So the recommendations really were it was whether we wanted to recommend some local research, and then there was also some other points about education and prevention work. So that's all sort of outlined in the email. I think my suggestion would be that we probably need to have a session, a sort of informal session on Teams or something where we discuss this. I'm going to be putting together a report, with all the evidence and everything that we collected. for the next committee in June or July, whenever the first meeting is. So they'll have that. If this committee obviously can make some recommendations about the direction they'd like to see that go, perhaps as part of this informal session, that would be really useful. Obviously, this is the start of a process. We may have another inquiry day later in the year, and yeah, we may want to explore this sort of local research. So there's still quite a bit to do, but yeah, it'd be good if we could just get a sense of a steer of the direction we want this committee wants it to go, based on the evidence that we've heard. But it doesn't have to be tonight.
Thanks, Dominic. So you'll send round an invite to us, will you? And then we can just come on and do an informal Teams meeting about directions of travel. Okay, everyone happy? Yep. Okay, thank you. And we were going to look at one other area, but we didn't. I think there wasn't an availability. I'm looking at Dominic for that review to take place. I think we were looking at violence against women and girls, but that was put on hold as far as I could understand.
That's right. So we did make a start with the evidence sessions for that review towards the end of last year. So there was one with the police in September and another one with the Director of Public Health and the Violence Against Women and Girls lead in November. The adults panel have also done a couple of sessions with the Violence Against Women and Girls team over the last year or two. So we have that evidence as well, and some written evidence from that team as well. So that's all written up, and we've got sort of 15-20 pages or so, but we did have capacity issues both on the scrutiny side and also on the public health side, which means that it is incomplete and we need to carry that over. So happy to expand a bit more on the reasons for that if required, but that's kind of where we are at the moment.
So just to get agreement, we're happy for that to carry over to the next OSC year. Yep. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Dominic. Thank you for that. So as far as I can see, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. So we've got future meeting dates to be confirmed, so we don't need to do that at this point. So just want to say thank you to everyone on the committee. It's been great. We've all, I think, scrutinised, effectively and made some great recommendations. So I wanted to thank Philip as the officer for this committee, and Dominic, who supported us tonight as well, and particularly to our co-optees, especially Lords and Yvonne, for giving up their time. I know it's a huge commitment for you, and there are a lot of papers to read normally, and we really do appreciate your sort of thoughts and support in scrutinising all the work we do as a committee. So huge thank you to you, and with that I'll say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippa.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.